We continue now at the top of Daf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 22a. On the previous Amud, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina said that the kior needs to be able to be mekadesh the hands and feet of at least 4 kohanim in order for it to be considered good for using for kiddush yadayim and v'raglayim. And the Gemara asked on this from a brisa. The brisa says that a kli sharis can be used for the sanctification of the hands and feet for service in the Beis HaMikdash, and it doesn't matter how large it is, whether it's able to hold a revius, bein she'ein bohen revius, whether it cannot hold a revius, which is a quarter of a lug, uvilvad shehu kli sharis, as long as they are kli sharis. Rashi explains, bein she'ein bohen revius halug mayim, even if it doesn't have a quarter of a lug of water, v'afagav deleka shiura gabi netilas yadayim, even though you don't have a shear of netilas yadayim, legabe kiddush lo ba'inan shear, in terms of kiddush yadayim v'raglayim for serving in the Beis HaMikdash, you don't require that minimum measurement, and so you see clearly from the brisa that it does not need to be enough water to be mekadesh for kohanim. It seems to go against what Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina said. And the Gemara continues, Amar Avad Baracha says, B'kodeach b'socho. The case over here in the brisa is when you drill within it. Rashi explains, B'kodeach b'socho kodeach dofno shal kior. They drilled a hole in the wall of the kior itself, v'toche b'socho kli katan, and then they stuck inside of it a small vessel, u'miksaso lechutz, and some of it is sticking out, v'yonek mimei ha-kior, it gets its water from the kior, u'motzi, and in that fashion, again, the water comes out, and they're mekadesh their hands and feet. Avol bi'ape nafshe, but the point is that if it would be independent, if the kli would be alone, ba'inon shir arbo kohanim, then in fact you would need the amount that can be mekadesh the hands and the feet of 4 kohanim. And the Gemara continues, V'ha mimenu amar achmana, but doesn't the pasuk say mimenu? Rashi explains the question, V'ha mimenu ksiv amas nisa parach. This is a question on the brisa we just brought. The amar kol kli shares ru'uyin heim lekadesh. It said again that all kli shares are good in terms of the sanctification of the hands and the feet. And here it says mimenu, as if it has to be from the kior. How can you say that any kli shares is good? Amar Achmana, so the Gemara says that the pasuk says yirchatzu. The pasuk says the word yirchatzu, they wash. That's l'rabos kli shares. That comes to include kli shares. Rashi says yirchatzu uvekarvasam el hamizbeach yirchatzu kra yiseiruhu. That pasuk is an extra. It's an extra word in the pasuk hayirchatzu. This word yirchatzu is extra. The ksiv le'el minei v'rachatzu mimenu. It already said that they're going to wash. V'samach le bevom el moed uvekarvasam el hamizbeach lo lichtav yirchatzu toha averachzu asamach koy. There's no need to write yirchatzu. It's already going on what it said earlier. It said v'rachatzu, and so therefore that's an extra word. And again, that's l'rabos kli shares. That's to include kli shares. The Gemara says Yachi, if so, kli chol nami. So let it be also a kli chol. Any vessel should be good. It shouldn't have to be a kli shares. Amar Abaye says kli chol lo matzas amrit. You can't say kli chol. You can't say a mundane vessel mikal v'chomer mikano, because we make a kal v'chomer from the base of the kior. Umakano shenimshach imo. If the base of the kior, which is anointed together with the kior, Rashi says shenimshach imo v'neskadesh b'mishichaso kemoso. It's anointed in the same way as the kior. Eino mekadesh yadayim v'raglayim, but you're not allowed to use the base for the sanctification of the hands and the feet. So umakano shenimshach imo eino mekadesh. If the base of the kior, which is anointed with it, is not able to be used for kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, so klichol she'eno nimshach imo. If you have a regular vessel which was not anointed with it, eino din she'eno mekadesh. Isn't it logical to say that it cannot be mekadesh? And the Gemara continues, V'kano menola. Now, how do we know that the base, that's no good for Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim? The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Yachol yekano mekadesh kederech shakir mekadesh. One might think that the base is mekadesh just like the kior. Talmud Lomer v'yasisa kior nechoshes v'chano nechoshes. It says you're going to make the kior of copper and the kano its base of copper. L'nechoshes hikashtiv v'lo l'davar acher. It's compared to copper and to nothing else. Rashi explains, "Lenachoshes hikashtiv lo behekesha yolafla." This is not really a comparison; it's not a hekesh. Ela kolomar, the Gemara just means to say dimisiv lekior. It is similar to the kior only in the fact lios shel nechoshes. It's only similar to the kior that it's made out of copper. Hakan kimo hakior. It means to say that the base is like the kior itself in that sense. Lenachoshes hikashtiv lo l'davar acher. In that sense, it's the same, but not in any other sense. Amar le Marzutra Breder of Mori le Ravina. Marzutra, the son of Rav Mori, said to Ravina, Malakano shein asoy letocho, but maybe the base is different because it's not made to contain anything. Tomar bechlichol she'asoy letocho, but a klichol might actually be better than the base because at least that's made to contain something. And so the Gemara instead instead says, Ela rather mimenu lemuute klichol. The word mimenu actually excludes klichol. It says from it, from the kior. Ihachi klisharis. Nami, the Gemara says, well, if you're using the word mimenu, why not exclude klisharis as well? And to that the Gemara says, Haravi Rachmani Yirchatzu. Well, there we have an inclusion. The pasuk includes it using the word Yirchatzu, as we said above. Umar Re'isa. Now, how do you know that you should include klisharis and you should exclude klichol? And the answer to that is Zeton Meshicha Kamo. This one requires anointing like the kior, meaning a klisharis is anointed with oil. V'zeh in tone Meshicha Kamo. When it comes to a klichol, there is no Meshicha. It requires no anointing, and therefore the klichol is not acceptable to use for Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim. And the Gemara continues at the Tudat. Samar Reish Lakish says, Kol hamashlim l'mei mikvah, anything that can complete the waters of a mikvah, mashlim l'mei kior, can also complete the waters of the kior, of the basin. L'revius eino mashlim, but for the revius, for the quarter of a lug, it cannot complete. Rashi explains, Kol hamashlim l'mikvah b'Meseches mikvos tanan, yesh malin v'lo poslin. In Meseches mikvos, we talk about what can be male by a mikvah. What does that mean? Malin is mashlimin li'arboim saw. Malin means whatever you can use to complete the 40 saw of water for the mikvah. That's what's necessary to create a kosher mikvah. V'hasam mefarshlu. It's explained over there. So whatever substance, whatever kind of water you can use for the mei mikvah, mashlim l'mei kior, you can use for the mei kior. Meaning l'shir dalat kohanim, for the measurement of 4 kohanim, as we said, the minimum measurement of the kior. But l'revius shel netilas yadayim, but the quarter of a lug that's required for netilas yadayim eino mashlim. That's not going to be good for netilas yadayim, for that revius. And the Gemara continues and asks, l'mu'ute mai, what are we coming to exclude? Rashi explains, L'mu'ute mai osa de'ein mashlim l'revius. What substance are we talking about that is not going to be good for a revius, which is good for mei mikvah and which is good for mei kior? And the Gemara says, Ilema l'mu'ute tit hanidok. If you're going to say that what we're excluding is tit hanidok, and literally that refers to liquefied clay, Rashi explains, if you're going to say we're excluding the tit hanidok, this liquefied clay, shehu min hamalin es hamikvah, that's one of the things listed that's good for the mikvah, kidiktani hasam, that's what's taught over there, again in Meseches mikvos. Nidok means dak, it's very thin, sharoy lahariko, mikli al kli, you're even able to pour it from one vessel to the other. If we're going to say that that is what is not good for the revius, so the Gemara continues and says, Hechidami, well, what exactly is the case? If a cow would bend down and drink from it, afilu l'revius nami, then actually it would be good for a revius. And if a cow would not bend down and drink from it, afilu l'mikvah nami ein mashlam, then it would not even be good for a mikvah. So it can't be that that is the substance that we are talking about. Rashi explains, if a cow would bend down and drink from it, she'eno of, meaning it's not so thick, li pasel mishasias behema, that an animal would not drink from it, so then afilu l'revius nami, then it's even good for revius. T'cholzman shenifsulu mishasias behema, as long as it's not able to be, as long as an animal is not able to drink it, bein bekli, bein bekarka, whether in a vessel or on the earth, psulin, it's going to be pasel, halo nifsulu, kisherin. But if it's something that the animal would drink, so then it's kosher. And again, if it's something the animal would not drink, afilu l'mikvah nami lo, then it's not good for a mikvah, delo nidoku, that's not considered like it's properly liquefied. So again, we cannot be referring to tit hanidok. And we will take a look at the Mesoras Hashas over here. Besukah Yud Tesam and Beis v'chein bereish perek zayin mikvos isa hanirok bereish. It's not hanidok, but over there it's found hanirok with a reish, which means that it's poured. It fits with Rashi's commentary over here. V'chein beperish Rambam v'Ravmi Bartanur v'Hatosas Yontiv Garsu Kulam. That's the girsa of the Rambam, the Rami Bartanur, the Tosas Yontiv. V'chein perish Rashi besukah Yud Tesam and Beis, and that's what Rashi says in Sukkah Yud Tesam and Beis. Hanirok sheroy lahoriko mikli al kli. Again, he says it's poured. You can pour it from one vessel to the other. And he notes v'tzarach in ksas b'perish Rashi dahacha divrei hamaskil nidok. Therefore, it's a little tzarachian. Over here, the divrei hamaskil in Rashi is nidok, but again, seemingly described in the same manner. And the Gemara continues with another suggestion. And rather, what we're coming to exclude is red gnats. Those would not be good again for the revius. Rashi explains, Yavchushin adomin kamin yitushin below kanafayim. These are like wasps without wings. They grow in the bottom of the barrels of wine on the outside. Yavchushim dakin. Yavchushin, these are very small or very thin. And they're also created from the water. water, so maybe that's what we're coming to exclude. But the Gemara says to that cannot be, because afilu be'einayu nami, even if they're be'ein, even if they're right in front of us. Rashi explains, afilu be'einayu nami, it means im kol ha-mikvah nasa mehen kosher. Even if the entire mikvah was made out of these red gnats, it would be kosher. V'reish Lakish nokat lishna de hashlama, but Reish Lakish, the language he uses is that it's completing the measure of the mikvah. It's not the entire mikvah, and so therefore it does not seem that we'd be referring to something like red gnats. And the Gemara continues and proves that, again, even if the entire mikvah would be made from these red gnats, it would be kosher. Ta'atanya, because we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Kol shetchilas briyaso min hamayim, anything that is created from water, matbilin bo, one is allowed to immerse in it, that's kosher for a mikvah. V'yomer Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, and Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi says, matvilin be'eno shel dog, one is even able to immerse in the eye of a fish. Rashi explains, be'eno shel dog gadol, let's say you have a large fish, shenimok shuman eno bechoro, and then what happened was the fat essentially liquefied, the eye liquefied, you can even use that as a mikvah. And so the Gemara continues with another suggestion. Amar Rav Papa says, L'me'ute nosan sa'a v'notal sa'a. What it's coming to exclude is when you add a sa'a and take away a sa'a. And Rashi explains, L'me'ute nosan sa'a v'notal sa'a, L'me'ute hanoch minim detnan bohen l'gabe mikvah. There are certain kinds which are mentioned in the Mishnah by mikvos, pa'amim ma'alin u pa'amim ein ma'alin, that sometimes they can complete the shear of the mikvah and sometimes they cannot. Me peiros v'chol mashke she'eno mayim. Let's say, for example, you have fruit juice or any liquid that's not water, v'temed mishehechmitz, and temed which ferments. Temed is a kind of liquid that comes from the remnants of grapes. V'katani hasam, and we learn over there, pa'amim malin, pa'amim ein malin. Sometimes they can complete the shear mikvah, sometimes they cannot. And the Mishnah explains, Ketzad, how so? Mikvah sheyesh bo lamed tes saw. And let's say a mikvah has 39 saw. V'nofla saw mehen l'sochan. And then a saw of these substances falls inside. Lo helaseu, it doesn't bring it up, it doesn't complete the shear. Perish, it means to say again, lo hishlamteu, it doesn't complete the shear. V'af lo pasalto, but it also doesn't disqualify it. And pa'amim demalin, sometimes it does complete the shear. Ketzad, how so? Hayu besocho arboim saw mechuvanos. Let's say you had 40 saw exactly. And then you added a saw of these kinds, of these substances. V'notal saw achar hanasin, and then you take away a saw after you added that saw, kosher, that it is kosher. Devotalu lahanach kamoy b'mikvah hashalom, because then what you added became nullified in that full mikvah. Hilkach ki chazra v'notal, therefore when you go ahead and take away, lo mifsal, it's not disqualified. Nimsa sha'mikvah hazen nishlam al yedeyem likashanatal, so it comes out that this mikvah is completed through these substances when you take away that saw. And Rashi notes, the chavase b'natilas yadayim. Now, if you had a similar case by natilas yadayim, lo mishalmi, so it wouldn't complete the shear. Shem haisabo revius mayim, if you had a revius of water, v'nasan miminim halolo l'socho rova revius, and then you put from these substances a quarter of a revius. V'natal connect them, then you took away the same amount. Psula, that would be disqualified. The lo chashiva shir zut, the revius live to linu, because that small amount of a revius is not important enough to be mevatel, to nullify those other substances. And the Gemara continues, the Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah Meseches Mikvos, mikvah sheyesh bo mem sa mechuvanos. If you have a mikvah with exactly 40 saw, nasan saw v'notal saw. If he adds a saw of these substances and then takes away a saw, hareza kosher. This is kosher again, exactly as Rashi explained. V'yamar Rav Yehuda bar Shila, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yochanan, and Rav Yehuda bar Shila said that Rav Asi said that Rav Yochanan said ad rubo. This is true up until a majority of the mikvah. Rashi explains ad rubo mi'irev bo miminin halolu ad rubo shel mikvah. If you add from these substances up until a majority of the mikvah, velo rubo bechlal, but it can't actually be a majority, it has to be up until a majority. Al yedei nesinas or natilas saw, again, through adding and taking away a saw, kosher, it will be kosher. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Papa says, Im kadach bo revius matvilin bo machten vitzinorios. If you drill a hole in the mikvah to create an area of revius of water, we'll see Rashi in a moment, then you can immerse in that needles and hooks, small vessels, ho'olam hechshera de mikvah asya, since that's coming from the kosher mikvah. And Rashi explains, Im kadach revius bedofen ha-mikvah, he's drilling a hole that's the size of a revius in the wall of the mikvah. V'hamayim nimshachin sham, and the water from the mikvah gets drawn to over there. Even though the water becomes less through that. And the waters of the mikvah are not mixing with that area that was drilled. And Rashi continues, again, a small kind of utensil used for spinning gold. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yirmiyah says that Reish Lakish says, May mikvah kasherim l'mei kior. You can use the waters of a mikvah for the waters of the kior. The Gemara asks, L'meimer, does that mean to say, the lo mayim chayim ninu, that it doesn't have to be flowing water, it doesn't have to be running water, you can even use the may mikvah? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa, b'mayim it says in water, v'lo b'yayin, it means water and not wine. B'mayim it says in water, v'lo b'mazug, it can't be in diluted wine. B'mayim, and it says b'mayim l'rabo shar mayim, that includes other water. The kal v'chomer l'mei kior, and kal v'chomer that you can use mei kior. And Rashi explains, Mei mikvah afal pi she'enon chayin. Again, we're talking about mei mikvah, even though that's not running, flowing water. Ksherim lahashiv hakior besocho, lamalos mehen veloses besocho. You can draw the kior inside of it in order to fill it up and to place that water into it. And again, the Gemara asks, Lameimer delo boy mayim chayim. Does that mean to say that you don't need mayim chayim? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa. Rashi explains the context of this brisa, b'toras kohanim, v'hakerev v'hakra'ayim yirchatz ba'moyim. It talks about rinsing the innards in water, v'lo b'mazug, and so it means again you can't use diluted wine, mayim v'yayin mezugim yachad. That's talks. Diluted wine is water and wine mixed together. Shnei chelkei mayim, it's 2 portions water. V'echad yayin and 1 wine. You have to use water. Sha'or mayim v'afilu mechunasin. You can use other water, gathered water. And then it said kal v'chomer, you can use mei kior. Now, my kal v'chomer l'mei kior, when we're saying certainly you can use mei kior, lav l'meimra d'mayim chayim nenu, doesn't that mean to say that the mei kior is a higher standard, so to speak, of water? It's mayim chayim. V'achi kamer kal v'chomer l'mayim chayim haru'uyin l'kior. Certainly mayim chayim, which is fit for the kior, sheksherin l'rechitzas kirvei kachim, that would be kosher in terms of washing, in terms of rinsing the innards of kachim. Isn't that what it means when it says l'rabos shar mayim v'kal v'chomer l'mei kior? Doesn't it mean mayim chayim? And the Gemara says, no, that's not what the brisa means at all. It just means the kaddish, kal v'chomer, that you can use the waters of the kior, because those are holy. Rashi says, lo dekadshi umei kior mamish. And according to this understanding, we're not just talking about water that is like mei kior, meaning it's mayim chayim, it has that quality. We're talking about the actual waters of the kior. Kayolef v'kal v'chomer, we're learning that out with the kal v'chomer. Sherochzen b'meim of kirvayim, that you're able to wash with the waters of the kior, these innards, v'kal v'chomer shalahen dekadshi, and the kal v'chomer is based on the fact that has kedusha, so certainly you're allowed to use the mei kior. But the Gemara continues and asks, "V'kadishi mal yusahi," but is the fact that it's kadosh, that it has holiness, is that really beneficial in this circumstance? V'hatani Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Shmuel teaches, some have the gears of Devei Shmuel, mayim she'ein lohem shem levoi, water that does not have some other name. And Rashi explains, V'hatani Devei Shmuel, but it's taught in the yeshiva of Shmuel, lo yadana hechakai, I don't know what this is going on, umiu shamina mina, but nevertheless we see from it, dehecha dechsiv mayim stamam, when it's written just mayim, ein mei kior ksherin lo, then mei kior is actually not kosher for it. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chof Beis Amid Beis.